Blonde is directed by Andrew Dominic and stars Ana de Armas, Adrian Brody, and Bobby Cannavale. The film follows the life of Norma Jean Mortison through her abusive childhood, rise to stardom, and eventual battle with mental illness as her world-famous stage persona of Marlyn Monroe. I must have gone into this movie as blind as someone in my position could have gone into. When it comes to the life of Marlyn Monroe, I know practically nothing about her. The only things that I know about her are the classic dress pose and, of course, the infamous Happy Birthday, Mr. President. And when it comes to the film itself, again, I went into it relatively blind. All I knew was that Ana de Armas was playing Marlyn Monroe, and the movie was rated NC-17. But with that said, subconsciously, for some reason or another, I must have been rooting for this movie, because when the reviews for this film came out, and they were all in the middle section, like around 50%, 53%, I was actually shocked. However, after watching the film for myself, I understand. This movie is kind of a mess. There are a lot of great things going for it, but at the same time, a lot of really sloppy things. But before we get into just why this movie is a mess, let's talk about all the legitimately great things in this movie. Starting with the acting. The acting from the entire cast is pretty freaking good. Every cast member brings the perfect amount of emotion to make their scenes count, whether they're in the movie for a solid hour or in the movie for just 5 minutes, and they all bring a good enough performance for that you remember every single one of them. Especially Adrian Brody, who I didn't even know was in this movie, but when he shows up, he brings his A material to this movie. And as for Ana de Armas as Marlyn Monroe, we'll get back to that in a bit, because there are some interesting things I want to talk about. But apart from the acting, the cinematography in this movie looks gorgeous. Everything is filmed in a way to make the movie look dreamlike, whether it's bright and vibrant and just a whole bunch of white surrounding the screen to make it look like you're in just a best dream possible, or it's just a whole bunch of quick cuts and weird imagery to make it look like a fever dream. Visually, this movie looks like a literal dream, and a lot of that is helped by the score, which is just as dreamlike or nightmarish as the movie is beautiful or disgusting. It's a fantastic pairing of visuals and audio that, for all of this movie's faults, I have to applaud. And now, let's get into the messier aspects of the film, starting with the part that isn't bad, just not as good as it should have been. And that is Ana de Armas as Marlyn Monroe. Let me just start off by saying she gives a fantastic performance, and the hair and makeup team deserve all of the praise in the world, because at certain points, she does look like Marlyn Monroe. And from a purely acting perspective, she does a fantastic job. During the first half of the movie, where she's supposed to be so petite and innocent, she gets that across in a way that seems like it would be fitting of Marlyn Monroe. And the last half of the movie, where Monroe's mental illness reaches its peak, good God, her outbursts are amazing. But with that said, for as great as the performance was on its own, did I buy her as Marlyn Monroe? Honestly, no, I didn't. And even though she looks like Marlyn Monroe and sometimes she speaks in an inflection like I would imagine Monroe would have spoken in, her accent is off. Ana de Armas's natural Spanish or Hispanic accent always bleeds through the performance, and because of that, you never see Marlyn Monroe when she speaks. You always see Ana de Armas doing a performance. A great performance, but not one that blends in with the person that it's based on. She does a great performance, and I'm positive she tried her hardest to hide her natural accent, but it's always there, and it just took me out of it. Speaking of taking me out of the movie, let's talk about the structure of it all. The structure of this movie is so off. The writing, the dialogue, and especially the off and on narration throughout the movie just makes the film feel overly pretentious. From a narrative perspective, the way that this movie is framed more as a fever dream than a straightforward biopic, I do respect it. But at the same time, because it's like that, you're constantly missing out on key details in the life of Marlyn Monroe, especially her actual rise to stardom, which is completely glanced over. I know this movie is supposed to focus more on the mental illness that followed Monroe through her life, but still, that's a key detail into some famous celebrity's life. And good God, the pacing of this movie is so long. This movie is nearly 3 hours long, and you feel every second of it. And it feels so long because the movie itself just feels so pretentious, whether it's from a writing perspective, or a directing perspective, or editing, or tone perspective. This movie just feels so overly pretentious, and because of that, the overly long runtime just damages the movie so much. Remember how in my Don't Worry Darling review, I said that I didn't agree with either critics or audiences on the score for that film? Well, this must be the exact opposite, because I completely agree with the average 50% rating that both critics and audiences have given Blonde. The acting from the whole cast is really good, the cinematography is gorgeous, and the score is almost dreamlike. But the movie is so overly long, written so pretentiously, and stylized so inconsistently that the whole structure of the movie just falls apart. Again, just like my Don't Worry Darling review, this is the epitome of style over substance. But instead of the style overshadowing the substance, it sort of damages the substance instead. I'm going to give Blonde a C. Well guys, thank you so much for watching, and let me know in the comments down below, what is your favorite biopic? For me, even though I don't think it's necessarily my favorite biopic, I do think that Cinderella Man is extremely underrated, and if you haven't seen it yet, please watch it. Thank you guys so much for watching, you guys the best, and don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell icon down below to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.